September 16th, 2024. Quite a while ago in terms of new releases, so not quite a new release and not one you were probably expecting me to talk about, but it is from one of my favorite genres, the Souls-likes. This Souls-like is based in Italian lore and it wears its inspirations very clearly on its sleeves. Unfortunately, it didn't have the best reception when it was first released because it had some issues, not to mention bugs and glitches, but it's much better now. What is it? Well, Enotria, The Last Song. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Foxx, and this is the Foxx Experience.
Yes! That's awesome!
Enotria, The Last Song, landed on September 16th, 2024 to mixed reception. It sits at an all-time 68% mixed score on Steam, with more recent reviews coming in at a 76, mostly positive. Clearly, the game's patches resolved issues that generated less than stellar reception initially. The earlier reviews for the game complain about bugs and jankiness, but I can confidently say that most, not all, most of that has been resolved. Note the word most. I did encounter occasional enemy glitchy movement, as well as some enemies freezing in place. It didn't happen often, and only once happened on a boss. But hey, that worked in my favor and made the boss quite easy to defeat. It sits at a subpar 6.0 user Metacritic score, and as always, I recommend you ignore the professional critic score, as most so-called professional games journalists are little more than left-wing propagandists spreading woke lies and half-truths. When it comes to most professional games journalists, and I did say most, not all, they can kiss my ass. They're a detriment to gaming, they typically hate gamers, and they're political ideologues spreading hatred and bigotry under the guise of DEI. As usual, I play games on PC whenever possible, and the PC version of Enotria plays extremely well, suffering from only occasional brief stutters at certain points. I'm playing on an Intel Core i7-14700K, 32 gigs of DDR5 system RAM, and an RTX 4080 Super at 1440p with all settings at max and motion blur turned off, and the game maintains a pretty consistent 80 to 90 some FPS at nearly all times, with some drops into the 60s. Performance was pretty solid, even without any upscaling or frame generation, which are available. I prefer straight rasterization without the use of any trickery to boost frame rate. I did, however, experience quite a few of those fatal error Unreal Engine crashes to desktop, which are never fun because you do lose a little bit of progress. The game doesn't save as often as maybe it should, but generally speaking, you're not going to lose much. However, no game in full release should be crashing like that, but wasn't a huge deal. I was still able to get to the game and have a lot of fun with it, regardless. The game install comes in at just over 12 gigabytes, which is incredibly small by today's standards. This may be in part due to some lower resolution textures, although nothing all that bad. Enotria retails at full price for $40, and that's a fair price given its roughly 13-hour runtime, over 20 hours if you want to do everything. Not charging $60 or $70 is a big plus here in my opinion, and it makes it easier to suggest the game at full price. My playthrough clocked in at just over 15 hours. Enotria has plenty of graphics options. FPS limit can be set up to 240 frames per second for me, which is my monitor's refresh rate. You have the option of VSync on or off and can either use DLSS, FSR, or ZESS, which is Intel's upscaling. DLSS frame generation is also available, but I never use those or upscaling if I can help it. There's a colorblind mode for those that need it. Basic options include anti-aliasing, lighting, shadows, view distance, texture, quality effects, reflections, post-processing, and motion blur. which, of course, all of us here at the Foxx Experience know, we turn motion blur off because no real gamer would ever use motion blur. No real gamer would be caught dead with that motion blur turned on. As mentioned, I had all settings maxed out with the exception of motion blur, no upscaling or frame gen, and I ran it at 1440p. I played with a controller, specifically my Razer Wolverine V3 Pro wireless controller, which is grossly overpriced at $200, but I'm glad I bought it. I don't regret the purchase at all. I love this controller. I think it's the best controller I've ever used. The only complaint I have about it is the D-pad. I'd rather it just be a Nintendo-style D-pad. You can, of course, play with mouse and keyboard, but I don't think that's really the way you're intended to play a game like this. It is a Souls-like. It's a third-person action RPG, and those, in my opinion, always play better with a gamepad.
Oh yeah!
The Steam Deck performance, on the other hand, leaves a lot to be desired. At low settings with FSR set to ultra performance, the game barely maintains at 30 to 40 frames per second, while looking less than stellar. This is definitely not a title you'll want to play on the Steam Deck. Save this one for your gaming PC or high-powered laptop. The presentation of Enotria is excellent, but probably a little divisive. Unlike Liza P, which has a modest Italian inspiration, Enotria really leans hard into its Italian roots. Not only is there a lot of Italian language terms in the game, which can be a bit confusing for those who don't speak the language, which includes me. What, guys, do I look Italian? Do I look Italian to you? There's nothing Italian about me. I barely ever even eat pasta. But the aesthetic is deeply Italian as well. I personally love how the game looks, as well as the unique theater aesthetic. The concept of masks goes way beyond visual as you equip them in loadouts that change your basic stats and combat style, able to switch between 3 loadouts on the fly. More about that later. Loadouts can only be assigned at bonfire-like checkpoints. You play as the maskless one, a faceless marionette-like being. You acquire masks during the game, which will give you more of a sense of identity. Not much is said of who you are, but what more do you need to know? Just fight everything that's trying to fight you. Kill everything that tries to kill you. This is a Souls-like. You know how this stuff works. You don't need to know exactly who you are. Most of the game's characters look like they belong on an old-fashioned live theater stage, which, as I mentioned, some people won't necessarily love. I do. I'm no particular fan of theater myself, but I found the unique aesthetic of Enotria novel and refreshing. And speaking of novels, and honestly guys, that's the best segue I could come up with for Enotria, you should check out my novel, New Tokyo. It's cyberpunk, sci-fi. It's available on Amazon in Kindle, paperback, and Kindle Unlimited, which means if you're already subscribed to Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for no additional charge. And there's a free sample on Amazon as well. So definitely check it out. Link is in the description. Enotria doesn't look like any other Souls-like I've ever seen, and the often comedic appearance of enemies and bosses belies their brutal, homicidal nature. Rather than grotesque monsters or ominous, foreboding knights, you'll be tasked with defeating jester-like, even clownish enemies. This is where the game shares a bit in common with Liza P, though Enotria chooses a much brighter, sunnier atmosphere to Liza P's brooding darkness. And the lighting in this game is superb. Sunlight will often shine through, casting a gorgeous orangish glow paired with excellent shadow work. The art direction in this game is absolutely stunningly beautiful, in my opinion, and it's a shame that so many of the textures don't quite live up to that level of quality. They're not terrible by any means, they're perfectly serviceable, but they could be a little better. Combat is also solid. You have the standard light versus heavy attack, a dodge attack, jump or plunge attacks, running attacks, and you can charge up your heavy attack. I love when you can charge up a heavy attack in a Souls game. Once FromSoft started putting charged R2s into their games, I really do miss when you can't charge them up. It just feels like something's missing. And nothing's missing here in Enotria because you can charge those R2s all day long. You can assign up to 4 spell-like mask lines to your loadouts, allowing you to build up towards their use by hitting enemies with normal attacks using your standard weapons. Once charged up, they allow you to unleash powerful and unique attacks, some of which will enchant your weapon or apply unique elemental effects, depending on how you've spec'd out your character. There's the standard leveling system with quite uniquely named stats like Bruiser, Assassin, Elementalist, Trickster, and Battle Mage. And you'll want to level based on your choice of weapons and spells. But don't worry, you can hit a simple button when you're in the menus and it'll explain to you what each of these stats does. Because if you're anything like me, I really had no idea what any of these stats meant at first, so I read the in-game description and it did a pretty good job explaining it. As mentioned, you'll acquire and equip masks, each one enhancing your base stats in different ways, as well as giving you other bonuses such as increased healing uses. You'll also choose between numerous aspects, each of which grants different bonuses with possible drawbacks. Some only enhance you, while others apply stat debuffs or other negatives, like taking additional damage to offset the benefits. For example, the aspect of Curtis increases your Bruiser, Assassin, and Trickster stats, but lowers your Elementalist and Battle Mage stats. It also boosts your physical power by 5%. Taking into account weapons, stat leveling, your 4 spells, mask, aspect, and 6 effects from the Path of Innovators, which are basically like passives that you equip, there is a near endless combination of options. If anything, I'd have to say I was overwhelmed by the breadth of choice in how to build a character here. The good news is you can essentially set up 3 entirely different builds and swap between them on the fly, although your stat leveling carries over in all 3. My solution in my first playthrough was to find the most viable general build and just stick to it, rarely ever switching loadouts. This is not actually how you're intended to play the game, because many of the enemies in the game will have elemental weaknesses and elemental strengths, so you're actually intended to swap between your 3 loadouts, having up to 6 different weapons, 2 weapons per loadout, and therefore, if a certain enemy is weak to, say, the poison element, then you'll want to switch to a loadout that emphasizes that, rather than continuing to use a loadout that uses something else that they may actually be strong or defensive towards. But I just stuck with a basic loadout using a basic giant greatsword. I almost completely ignored the elemental aspect of it, and let me tell you something, I had a tough time with a lot of these enemies. So do as I say, not as I do. You really want to pay attention to the elements here. And the way it works is you'll see these icons in the upper left corner of your screen, and they go in sort of a circle. And they show you what is weak to what, but in a counterclockwise direction. So if you see the icon for that bottom one there, then you know that the one counterclockwise to it, one step to the left, if you're moving leftward counterclockwise, that's what that enemy is weak to. It's really easy once you understand it, but until you do, it is really confusing. However, like I said, just pay attention to that little icon chart right there, know it goes counterclockwise, figure out what they're weak to, switch to that weapon or a spell if you have one, and boom, you're doing a ton more damage. You can unlock special perks using special skill points you acquire from defeating enemies, but bear in mind that unlocking these does not automatically give you the passive benefits. You need to equip them to your loadout, and you can only have 6 active at one time on each loadout. So, choose wisely, my friends. And it wouldn't be a Souls-like without that refillable healing item that can be upgraded by finding other items in the game world. The upgrades are automatic and immediate, not requiring you to visit anyone to apply them. You can expand how much it heals and how many times you can use your heal, just like you could in the Souls series. So your ultimate goal in combat against more powerful foes like bosses is not so much to simply do damage, but to cause them to unravel. This is essentially a stability bar, and with enough attacks or parries, you'll fill up their bar and cause them to go into a vulnerable state, opening up your chance at a powerful finishing move. You'll want to parry as much as possible in this game. This game is all about parrying. You can get a partial parry, but perfect parries is where it's at. This will build their unraveling meter much faster than just about anything else. Learn to parry and do it often. You can of course dodge, but parrying is the focus here. And don't be afraid to throw in a few quick attacks in between the parries. That will also build up the unraveling meter, but once again, parries are king here. One really awesome thing that feels odd at first is that you pick up most items by simply walking over them. Yeah, you don't need to tap a button, hold a button, you just walk over the item and boom, you pick it up. This is so unusual that it caught me by surprise. I mean, yeah, a lot of games have you automatically pick up gold, but how many games can you think of like this where you can see the item on the ground and you just walk over it and boom, it's yours. You pick it up. No need to click anything, touch anything, nothing, just walk over it. Trust me, it's hard to get used to at first, but you'll love it after you get used to it. And there's literally no reason not to collect everything because there's no weight limit here for your inventory or inventory space. Treasure chests still require pressing A to loot, however. The main color theme here in Enotria is gold. So much stuff is gold. The bonfire-like Corda Resonantes are gold, the treasure, special interaction points, armor, many of the attacks, the Gratia element, and even the golden sunset. All of it is doused in wonderful, beautiful shades of gold. It's the game's well-defined motif, and it fits. And on the subject of themes, the game's music is not only excellent, but thematically in line with the rest of the game itself. It fits perfectly and never feels out of place. There's a little guitar-style riff that you'll hear again and again, ensuring it gets stuck in your head, for better or worse. It's pretty much the game's defining instrumental motif. I love the music in this game, especially the boss music. The sound effects are also incredible, top-notch. I particularly enjoyed the creaking noise when climbing wooden ladders, adding real depth of immersion. Voice acting is also amazing and some of the best I've heard in a while. Felt like nearly every single voice actor put their heart and soul into their performances here. Bravo! However, I have to warn you, there are some characters who speak to you, but don't have a voice actor. There are no voice lines. It comes off very strangely. I thought at first that the game just like glitched out and wasn't playing the voiceover, but apparently when the game first came out, there were a lot more of these characters that didn't have a voice, and they added them in afterwards. So not all of the characters are voiced, which is a little strange, but you'll get used to it. I gotta tell you, I was surprised at the level of Memoria inflation in this game. Memoria is the equivalent of souls, which you acquire from killing enemies or acquiring Memoria items. You can also sell items. Memoria is both experience points and currency, just like souls. I would notice after a while that I'd look up at the corner of the screen and be like, dang, I got like 450-some thousand Memoria saved up. I'm like, that's crazy. But keep in mind, the amount of Memoria required to level up as you get higher up in the levels does also inflate quite a lot. It stays balanced, but get used to seeing higher and higher and higher numbers. And just like Souls, you've got that staple feature of dropping your Memoria where you die, and losing it forever if you don't reacquire it. The bonfire checkpoints, as I mentioned, are called Corta Risonante, continuing with the music theme that this game has. They look awesome, and activating them has them vibrate back and forth like the string of an instrument. Man, the sound and visual effects in this game, truly amazing. Especially the parry sounds. Damn, the parry sound rocks in this game. And when you die, the game doesn't say you died, it says morte, which is Italian for you suck. There are crabs that drop items you can sell for Memoria, this game's version of Souls. The funny thing is how they attack you. They don't chop at you with their pinchers, no, they straight up bitch slap you. Not only that, but they then backhand you with their pincer. Damn, these crabs really make you their bitch. You have two difficulty options which you can only choose upon starting a new game. Story mode and Souls-like mode. Yep, definitely not hiding their Souls inspiration here. I played on Souls-like and this game was brutally difficult at times. Some bosses were much harder than others and it wasn't always consistent. My one gripe with the game is that some bosses that specialized in using elemental attacks could often hit you with a flurry of insanely powerful spells that would bring you from full health to dead in what felt like less than 2 seconds. For Souls veterans, story mode is a cakewalk. For those new to the genre, it provides just enough challenge to help them get into the groove without dying too much. So make your choice wisely and you're stuck with it. They could do with some balancing on the difficulty, as the bosses don't necessarily increase in difficulty as you progress further in the game. I mean, they kind of do, but not consistently. You never know how difficult a boss will be, whether you're close to the beginning or near the end. The final boss definitely wasn't the biggest challenge for me, though I thought the final encounter was excellent. An awesome battle of wits between two opponents, and the boss never felt unreasonable or insane. Some of them, however, will feel kinda crazy. Once you get used to it, you can figure out how to defeat them, but like I said, I wish that difficulty curve just steadily went up, instead of kind of shooting up at times and then coming way back down and then shooting up. It's not a huge deal, but it happens here. Bear in mind, there is no multiplayer here, so no player summons. In fact, there are no summons at all, players or NPCs. It's just you in this game, and you'll have to go it all alone. Not having PvP means that there's no need to balance player abilities for player versus player combat, which allows them to focus entirely on the PvE side of things. I'm actually glad. I'm perfectly fine with that. Whenever you have PvE in a game like this, you always end up having them constantly trying to balance out all the abilities, and then they end up nerfing some stuff, making some stuff stronger, slowing certain things down, speeding certain things up, constantly patching and changing. It's nice when you can just focus on the PvE. The story is absolutely incredible. It's not always clear what's what and who's who, but that's how it goes with any good Souls-like story, am I right? I didn't read all the optional notes you can find, but doing so would have surely helped me figure it all out. If you want a good story, there's plenty of it here, and it's more than worth paying attention to. The intro cinematic explains the basics and does a kind of roll call of all the major bosses for the game. It's very reminiscent of Dark Souls when you're introduced to the major players of the story. The narrator does a fantastic job laying it all out for you, and you never feel like the translation is off or wrong. Instead of a horrible fog, as in Demon Souls, or a hollowing, as in Dark Souls, you have a different problem. Stagnation. Your goal is ultimately to put an end to stagnation, into, reignite inspiration, music, passion, dare I say, soul. You gotta end the stagnation, because when it comes to theater and music, performances, the last thing you want is for people to be stagnant. You need them to be passionate, inspired, and that's your job. Put an end to the stagnation. And one of the absolute best things about Enotria, bar none, you can buy pizza. Hell yeah. It wouldn't be an Italian game without some pizza. Speaking of which, why does Mario get stronger by eating mushrooms? Shouldn't he eat pizza? I know that's a Ninja Turtles thing, but no reason Mario can't do it too. Maybe switch it up. Have Mario eat calzones. Wait a second. How much is that pizza? 100,000 memoria for a single-use consumable? Holy shit, that better be some really good pizza. People have criticized the bosses in this game to no end, and I get their complaints, but some of these issues were resolved in the patches. I found most of them to be solid, if not good, with a few stinkers. Even FromSoft has had their fair share of bad bosses. No need to harp too hard on these guys. They are good enough and fit well in the story. But the Queen of Maja? Fuck her. She would continually blast me down in a single volley of overpowered magic. Did not like. Some people confuse an issue with the bosses. Yes, while some have slightly janky movements, don't confuse that with a really cool mechanic here. Some of these bosses will psych you out by faking their moves. Yes, they'll start out performing one move and then switch to a different move. It's pretty cool. Not too difficult to pick up on if you're paying attention. I'm going to say this. I absolutely love Enotria, the last song. It is extremely rare for me to like a game so much that has a Metacritic score that this game has, a 6. I mean, it is almost unheard of. I downloaded Enotria, the demo, tried it out, found that it wasn't quite complete, wasn't super impressed. Then, when I saw Enotria in my wish list, I was like, I remember playing that demo, let's see how it's doing. I'm gonna take a shot on this, and I'm really glad I did. Enotria, the last song, was one of my favorite Souls experiences ever. And I know, so many people disagree with me on that. It's obvious from the Metacritic, it's obvious from a lot of the reviews, it's obvious from the overall Steam score. However, let me emphasize this. I think a lot of that negativity was based on the original released state of the game. It has greatly improved since then. They've added a lot of stuff. They've added a lot of voice work. They've fixed a lot of the issues. They've nearly gotten rid of all the glitchiness with characters and enemies, bosses freezing up. The game plays well. Most of those issues are gone, but I know you can never make a second first impression. And this emphasizes the importance of getting a game right and releasing it in a good solid state. I wouldn't say that they released this in a bad state, but it had some issues. They fixed them for the most part. And now, I think that if they had released Enotria, the last song, in the state that it's in now, you wouldn't be seeing a 6 on there. You wouldn't see a mixed reception. I think this would have gotten in the high 7.0 to 8. And the reason I say that is because they went hard into the Italian lore. They went really hard into that. And I think for some people, they're just not going to like it as much as they would something like a dark fantasy game like Dark Souls or Lies of P. However, for me, this was really refreshing. We have seen far too many of the Souls-like games lean really hard into dark themes, dreariness, death, destruction, the Halloween, all this dreary, dark, brooding stuff. And yet here we have a much lighter, brighter looking game that still has a lot of those dark themes, but it doesn't feel the need to make the game world dark. It doesn't feel the need to inundate you with grotesque looking monsters like a lot of the games do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like those games. I like Lies of P. I like Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne. They're all great games, but I was ready for something different. And Enotria, the last song, was something different, is something different. And I dare say, if I were to make a list of my top 10 games of all time, Enotria might just make that list. I'll say this. If I were flown out to some special event, which would never happen, and I were sat down in front of a computer and allowed to play Enotria, the last song, and I was told that this was From Software's new and upcoming Souls-like game, I might have actually believed that. I would have found it to be incredibly different from what they've done before, but I would have believed that it could have been something from Software, especially if it didn't have any, the jankiness that it originally released with, which it, for the most part, doesn't now. So let me tell you this. You will look at a lot of reviews. You will look at the Metacritic or the Steam scores and whatnot. I implore you, ignore all those. Pick this game up, $40, it's worth it, and give it a shot. You can refund it on Steam, but I don't think you will. I think you'll find that Enotria, the last song, is more than worth a playthrough. I'm already on my second playthrough, and it's very rare for me to immediately start playing a game all over again after I've finished it. So if you missed Enotria when it first released, well, you're actually better off for it. You can now play a better version of the game. It's available right now for you. I know I've been trying to convince you to get this game, and part of that is because I don't want you to be scared off by those initial lower scores that it got. Consider that the state of the game as it is now is what you will play. What they played then is what they played then, and they gave it the score that they gave it. But if you play it now, you're playing a slightly different game, a much better one, and one that I think is more than worth your time. As you all know by now, I don't give games numerical scores, but if I were to give Enotria, the last song, a score, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. I couldn't quite give it a 10 because there is the occasional bit of jankiness. There are the occasional glitches where enemies do freeze up. There are a few voiceovers that are noticeably missing, but this is an amazing game and one that I definitely think all Souls genre fans should give a shot. Thank you so much for joining me once again in this video. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of Enotria if you played it. Consider grabbing a copy of my novel. And as always, my friends, stay real, keep playing, and never forget, yesterday's tomorrow is today's today. See you in the next one.
Oh yeah, baby!